We'll talk later on about stuff people do in theatres when plays are on, because the latest is unbelievable. But we will talk first about an accident on a railway line, and this next item will contain graphic details of serious injuries caused by a train. So we go back to Friday night, September 2022. Sarah de Lagarde left work late from her office in Liverpool Street in London. It was around 9 p.m. She'd had a long week. On top of her day job as a public relations executive, she was still recovering from having had COVID the week before and had sent off a PhD proposal earlier in the day. So she sank onto a seat on a train on the Northern Line, and she rested her eyes for a moment, but she slipped into a deep sleep. When she jolted awake, she found she'd travelled 8 miles past her intended stop. She was now at the end of the line on an open-air platform in High Barnet. It was dark and raining heavily. So she got off the tube. She took a couple of steps forward and then realised, no, wait, this train is now going to go back in the other direction, so she's got to reboard it. And in doing that, she slipped, lost her balance, and fell under the tube train. Bear in mind it's stationary at this point. The fall breaks her nose and front teeth. She blacks out. But then the disastrous thing happens. The train leaves 6 minutes later and almost completely severs Sarah's right arm. She regains consciousness. She starts crying out for help. No one hears. She's hit then by a second train, which crushes her right leg. She's sitting in front of me now. She survived after going to hospital that night. And she's very, very keen to talk about this because it might stop it happening to somebody else. Sarah de Lagarde, welcome. Thank you for coming in.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
So we have to go back to this moment in September 2022. Completely mundane. I should say you were coming from the office. You hadn't been drinking or anything, which I know people started suggesting wasn't true. Take us through what happened after you woke up on the tube and thought, I missed my stop.
Right. So you're right with the first thing is that, it was Friday evening, but there was no drinking involved at all. I was just keen to get home, as the next morning I was meant to fly to Germany to see my dad, whose 70th birthday it was. So I was quite keen to get home fast to help my kids pack their luggage. And I woke up at the wrong station, exited the train, and thought, no, wait a second, I need to get back to my stop, which is Camden. And then I slipped on a puddle of water that was on the platform. I have a very clear memory of that, and fell forwards and crashed against the train and broke my nose and my 2 front teeth. And the next thing I remember is a searing pain going through me and the realisation that something had gone really, really badly wrong. And I remember my right side being completely immobile. I couldn't move it. And at that point I thought, yes, there's...
And that moment was when the train departed, correct?
Yeah.
So, because I've tried to visualise this extraordinary accident, the first stage. You go head first into the gap between the train and the platform, is that right?
Well, I don't have a recollection of that moment. I only can remember a sense of falling backwards.
Oh, backwards. So feet first then?
Or shoulders first.
Okay.
I don't know exactly.
Because you would never think the gap was big enough. You would think somebody would see. Nobody saw this.
So I did actually watch the CCTV footage of that, and there were people around that. It wasn't late on a Friday. There were people walking around the station, people who got off the train at that point, but nobody heard me or saw me. And the bit that is extremely upsetting for me is that we are told that CCTV had replaced staff on the station's platform, but that CCTV footage isn't watched live. No,
well, I was wondering whether, I don't know, in the ticket office there is somebody sitting with those screens in front of them, but that's not the case.
That's not the case.
It's not watched live by anyone, it's not monitored.
No. And I think the one excuse that I heard was to say, there's so many feeds, how can possibly a human look at that and spot something untoward? But then, my thinking went around artificial intelligence is a big topic, and wouldn't that be a system that would be appropriate for it?
Now, the extraordinary thing here, very unsettling thing, is that when you went under the train, it wasn't moving at the time because it was at the end of the line, effectively. Your handbag, which is a bright was it pink, your handbag?
No, that was my coat.
Your coat was
was pink, but my handbag was a laptop bag.
Right, so it was quite a big thing, and it got caught. You fell, and it didn't. And it was then seen by somebody.
That's right. The train driver picked it up and didn't think of, common sense would dictate that you would think this is a strange place for a handbag to be.
But wedged between the train and the platform.
Exactly.
Yeah. And he was, just to be clear, he was driving the train. He was about to drive, so he was heading back towards the cab.
That's right, yeah, I think. And had he only looked down, he would have seen me. And that's the upsetting bit, is that, he saw a bag in an unusual place, thought nothing of it, just picked it up and walked away with it. Had he only looked down, he would have seen me, because I was wearing a very bright pink coat.
He takes the bag. He doesn't do that. He goes and drives the train. The movement of the train virtually removes your arm. You don't have it now. He then hands the bag into lost property, and when your friend comes to collect it, she's charged how much?
£20. I took my friend weeks and weeks of research to locate that bag, and I find it upsetting that, again, TfL would have known about my accident, could have made an effort to find me and to restore my bag, but they didn't. They just put it away in a lost and properties office and charged my friend, or wanted to charge my friend £20.
Okay. Then, so we're going back to this very graphic description, and I'm hoping you don't mind me taking you through it. You've had the train go over your right arm. You are then incapacitated but conscious. You're there, and you see this amazing thing. Your mobile phone is within reach. Is that right?
That's right. I just bought a neon casing for it, and it had a neon orange lanyard as well. So
and everyone was joking, what are you buying that bright colour for?
Exactly.
And now
it was a bit of an eyesore.
Yeah, but now it turns out to be the best purchase you've ever made. So when you pick it up, what do you do?
Well, I had to crawl over the tracks to pick it up, and I thought, this is it, I'm saved, I can call. And my first thought was to call my husband with it. But the issue with it is that it didn't recognise my face. My face was unrecognisable to the software. And at that point I thought, okay, I need to switch gears, try to type in the code with my left hand, which is my non-dominant hand. And my fingertips were wet, the phone was wet, and there was no way that I could dry it off. So the phone didn't help me at that point.
So you're lying on the tracks, you've got your phone, you're wearing a pink coat, and still nobody's seen you. It's not even midnight at this station. And then you hear what?
So at that point, I resorted to call for help again.
Just vocally?
Vocally, yeah. I had my voice was the only thing I had left, and I was really, really shouting, somebody help me, my name is Sarah, and I don't want to die. And then I heard the second train come in, and I was at that point lying on the tracks in a bright pink coat with a neon phone in my hand.
And these tracks on London Underground are lit at station. They're visible. So I would assume the guy who's going to spot you is going to be the driver of that second train.
Yeah.
Did he?
No. So the train ran over me a second time. This time it claimed my right leg. And I was still conscious by some miracle, or by sheer stubbornness. I was still conscious, and I continued to scream for help. At that point, my voice was quite high-pitched. I was in complete panic at that point, thinking, that's it, nobody's ever going to find me. There will be just train after train after train coming. And at that point, I think somebody heard me and came over.
And then you have the emergency services, and somehow your life is saved, although there was a moment when you thought you were just on the brink of death.
Yeah. There was a moment where I felt a cold ice block in my chest spreading. And at that point, I thought, this is it, I'm going to die. But the bit that I also find quite upsetting is that even when I was found, it took precious minutes. Bearing in mind that if you're severely injured, you can bleed out within 4 minutes. It took over 5 minutes for staff, once they found me, to dial the correct number for emergency services. I find that extremely upsetting because everybody knows that when you see a person severely injured, there's only one number to call, and that's the emergency services.
So what were they dialing then?
They were trying to speak to operators. They were basically in a complete state of panic and couldn't read the emergency number on the place where that was fixed. And I think these guys have not been trained in dealing with emergency situations.
Right.
Unacceptable.
Well, you walked in today looking, I must say, happy and bright, but I obviously saw what's happened with your body. Can you describe it to us?
So I was rushed to hospital, and the surgeon made me sign a disclaimer form to allow amputations because my limbs were non-viable at that stage. And so I sustained an amputation of my right arm above the elbow and an amputation of my right leg below the knee.
Right. So you've got prosthetics now. How are they working for you?
It's been a journey. It took me over 12 months to really find a stable prosthetic. It's really tough.
Mm. And what about your kids? Because they were very young.
Yes, so I've got 2 daughters, a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old, and they, in the beginning, they were really, really resilient, and I was quite surprised by that. So children have this incredible ability to protect themselves into the future. So they visited me on day 2 in the hospital with a drawing of our whole family, including our 2 cats, and me wearing prosthetics. And so they called me Robot Mom from the beginning. But now I can see the cracks showing. I can see that they are suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. They have attachment issues. They're scared of the dark. They are, having working memory loss issues. So, PTSD that I hope at working with psychologists we can work past.
And I want to talk some more, but I'll play some music first. But just if you can sum up what your message is for people coming out of this, what is it? Is it to the authorities, to Transport for London, to all of us? What would you say?
I would say that we need to raise awareness for the fact that there are some serious safety issues with Transport for London. That on the one side, increasing ticket prices is one thing, but if safety decreases for all of that, that's not okay at all.
Okay, well, I'm sure that goes to public transport up and down the country. Stay with us. Sarah de la Garde, amazing story. Run over by 2 trains at High Barnet Station just over a year ago, and is here talking about the lessons. We'll speak some more after this. Well, I'm just bowled over meeting Sarah de la Garde, who is it fair to say, lucky to be alive, Sarah?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, fell under a train, the train moved. She's then trapped between the tracks. It's night, it's raining, still nobody sees. The so-called CCTV obviously isn't monitored. We should have realised that. And then another train comes and she's sitting in front of me with a prosthetic arm and a prosthetic leg, but very much present here. There is a statement from TfL, from somebody called Nick Dent, who's Director of Customer Operations. Our thoughts continue to be with Sarah de la Garde and her family following the devastating incident at High Barnet Station last year. We've offered her direct support through our Sarah Hope line service, and we remain receptive to Sarah's views about the network. Safety is our top priority. Now, the Sarah Hope line mention brought us back to something we talked about before, which is an accident that affected the Hope family, Sarah, her kids, her mum, that was a bus. And Sarah Hope is on the phone line now. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Jeremy. Hello. Hi.
Hello. It's all coming back. Your accident, and now this one involving. Okay, it's a train, but Sarah de la Garde, and I'm sure you know all about it.
Yeah, I know all about it, and of course I was quite overwhelmed to hear her story in such a way. It's awful that nobody noticed her. I think that's absolutely terrible. Transport for London always tell me that safety is paramount, and safety is the thing they put first. But when you hear stories like that, it's awful because and also the interesting thing is our crash happened nearly 17 years ago now, and I do a lot of work with the road safety charity Road Peace, and one thing I do with them now is we actually don't call it an accident because so many of these road crashes are caused by criminal behaviour or by things that could be improved, and they are not accidents, they are preventable. These things shouldn't happen. So somebody should have seen Sarah.
Does it shock you? I'll have to call you, but with surnames as well, because you're both Sarah. Sarah Hope, does it shock you that CCTV isn't monitored?
I'm really shocked. I'm really disappointed by it. I worked so hard with Transport for London. We have the Sarah Hope line, which was initially set up to help road crash victims, because I was a victim of a road crash in which a bus drove onto the pavement he went from about 0 to 60 in a fit of road rage. My daughter lost her leg. My mother died in front of me, and I was sat under the bus in a pool of blood. And what Sarah said really resonated with me. It's amazing how somehow I banged my head so hard, but I also regained consciousness. Well, I stayed conscious, and I remember the anger, and I remember screaming. And it's just incredible how your life your anger takes over and you're just desperate. And I feel so sad I feel awful that nobody saw her. This is a busy tube station.
Are there any...
I don't think there's any excuse for Transport for London.
Are there any obvious answers? I know that sometimes people in cities where there are a lot of buses, they feel amazed that buses don't obey speed limits. I mean, I see them the whole time going 30 miles an hour in a 20 mile an hour zone, for example.
Yes, I mean, I sort of have helped the bus safety team, but I'm not doing so much at the moment. But they are meant to, there's no excuse. They're meant to all drive at 20 now. So I don't know why anyone would be driving at more than 30. Any bus driver would be going at more than 20.
Sarah de la Garde, we were talking earlier about what lesson for life you can give your kids, my kids, Sarah's kids. What would you say here out of this?
I would say that actually sometimes we associate danger with things that are out of the ordinary. Like I climbed Kilimanjaro a month before the accident, and you would think that that's the place that could be dangerous.
Totally.
But this accident happened in the most mundane situation. I've been taking the tube for over 20 years, and I always thought, I'm a paying customer. I expect a level of safety while boarding the trains, while being in the stations. And the realization that in a mundane setting, you're not safe, you need to be so careful. I think that's the lesson learned from that.
Well, that's very wise, Sarah Hope, isn't it?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think what people don't understand is the impact of these sudden, violent crashes. I set up a petition now for there to be a victims commissioner for road crash victims. And I'm going to work really hard on it now because, people don't understand the terrible, terrible impact that, along with a dreadful, sudden, violent injury, you're faced with criminal prosecutions and you're faced with criminal trials and probably personal injury law, and it's all so hard. It's such a difficult thing to navigate. What Sarah will be now going through is so difficult.
How are you, and Sarah de la Garde, let me just ask you in closing how you're doing, how your family are doing, how's the road for you?
last year was a very, very difficult year for sure, because you have to redesign your life completely. I mean, I was working full time. I'm no longer able to do that. I mentioned my children facing psychological issues, as well as my husband. We're just trying to rebuild our lives. And after the ups and downs of last year, both physically and emotionally, I hope that this year will be a little bit more peaceful. But that said, I have now built up the strength to take on this challenge with TfL. I launched a petition on change.org at the end of last year. It seems to resonate with people. I'm asking for more safety. I'm asking for an investigation into their safety procedures, that lessons are learned from this accident, and over 31,000 people have already signed it. That was a really quick reaction to this. So TfL is trying to portray this as a freak incident, but it is not. It is something that seems to happen more often than we think.
Listening to your story, I think, yes, sliding under the train in the way you did may be a 1 in 1,000, but there is no way that train should have moved after 6 minutes, or that another train should have hit you. That's the thing. Nobody saw. It's just incredible.
But 16 people a month are having injuries like mine or die. 16, that is just 16 too many.
Just on what, the London Tube network?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. It's an incredible story. I'm glad you're here to talk about it. Sarah de Lagarde, who was run over by 2 tube trains only just about a year ago. And also thanks to Sarah Hope, whose own family accident inspired something called the Sarah Hope Line, which is all about trying to make public transport safer. You may be in a city, a town where you think, no, it's not safe enough where I live. Do get in touch if so. Blue-eyed.